Great. I think we will go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone to today's interactive discussion, Stop Fixing Women, Why Institutional Transformation is Key to Women's Participation in Peace Operations, taking place today on Wednesday, the 26th of May, 2021. This webinar is being recorded. The recording of today's session will be sent to all registrants as well as hosted on DCAF's website. Before we start, I want to go over a few housekeeping issues. Interpretation is being provided for today's session for English, French, Russian, and Spanish. I take this opportunity to remind all panelists to speak slowly and clearly so that our interpreters can work effectively. During this session, all participants will be in listen-only mode with microphones muted. I wanted to quickly share a 10-second poll asking all of you to respond with which language you are accessing this webinar in. So please take a moment to respond to this poll that I have just shared. Thank you so much. If you want to just take a quick moment to respond to that poll, that would be great. Throughout the discussion, we will be welcoming questions coming in from the audience. If you would like to ask a question, please chat your question in using the chat feature, and we will read as many of your questions as possible out loud to allow the panelists to respond. Please indicate who you are directing your question to. This webinar is organized by DCAF, the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance, and is co-hosted by OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights and UN Women. This session is part of our joint collaboration to share and discuss the Gender and Security Toolkit. At the end of today's webinar, we will share a link to a brief evaluation survey. We encourage all participants to provide your honest feedback on today's session. Your feedback is valuable and helps us choose the topics and refine the format for following webinars in this series. If you have any questions about this webinar, please feel free to send me a chat and I will do my best to respond to you as soon as possible. I would now like to introduce Cristina Finch, Head of Gender and Security Division of DCAF. Cristina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Natasha. Dear colleagues, on behalf of DCAF, it's absolutely my pleasure to welcome all of you joining us today in this conversation with a panel of experts on peacekeeping, organizational culture, gender, and the security sector. Because the International Day of the United Nations Peacekeepers is on Saturday, we want to use this opportunity to highlight the groundbreaking research and creative initiatives currently taking place on women's meaningful participation in peace operations. Under the umbrella of the Canada-led ELSI initiative, in partnership with Cornell University and research partners in 8 pilot troop and police contributing countries, DCAF has developed and tested the Measuring Opportunities for Women in Peace Operations MOWIP methodology, which, as the name suggests, measures opportunities and barriers for women's meaningful participation in peace operations. To date, the MOWIP methodology has been implemented in security sector institutions in 4 countries: the Zambia Police Service, the Ghana Armed Forces, the Uruguay Armed Forces, and the Senegal Police and Gendarmerie. The aggregate data arising from the MOWIP assessments in this varied set of troop and police contributing countries sheds new light on the main barriers that countries must overcome if they are to achieve the goal of women's full and equal participation in all functions and at all levels in peace operations. Indeed, this new research provides concrete evidence of the clear connection between the institutional culture of security sector institutions that deploy peacekeepers and the meaningful participation of women in peacekeeping. Gender stereotypes, gender bias, patriarchal masculinities, unhealthy bonding mechanisms, and discriminatory work environments are key parts of the problem. Their prevalence explains why, 20 years after the first calls for action to increase women's participation in peacekeeping, women still only make up about 7% of all deployed uniformed personnel, a shockingly low number that cannot change quickly enough. Too many initiatives designed to increase progress have been focusing on women, and only women. Women are encouraged to join security sector institutions, undergo training on leadership and technical skills, asked to speak up, to gain confidence, to trust in themselves and to inspire others, to become gender advisors and gender champions, and of course, to do all of this while single-handedly balancing professional commitments and their domestic obligations. Supporting women to make it in a man's world might look like empowerment, but it leaves the systemic problem unaddressed. As Natasha mentioned, this webinar is one of a series grounded in the Gender and Security Toolkit, a set of resources jointly published by UN Women, OSCE ODIHR, and DCAF in February of last year. The Gender and Security Toolkit offers guidance on how to promote gender equality within the security and justice sector, and how those sectors can better contribute to gender equality within broader society. Today, we will discuss how the strategies and pathways for change outlined in the toolkit can contribute to achieving the goals of gender parity and gender equality in multilateral peace operations. Indeed, police, gendarmerie, and armed forces institutions can and must be part of the solution. By working to achieve more inclusive and gender equal work environments, they can succeed in deploying greater numbers of women in different roles and capacities to peacekeeping. How? That's exactly what our excellent speakers will address today. Connecting perspectives from academic research, security sector experience, and UN peacekeeping deployment. We hope to have a dynamic conversation that catalyzes further reflection, exchanges, and action for institutional transformation across a variety of countries and contexts in the future. And now, it's my privilege to introduce our speakers for today. First, Dr. Sabrina Karim. She's the head of the Hardis Family Faculty Fellow, Assistant Professor in the Department of Government at Cornell University. She's the lead author of the MOIT methodology developed in the framework of the ELSI initiative. And she's also the head of the Gender and Security Sector Lab, which studies the role of gender in security sector institutions, particularly on outcomes related to security force personnel's attitudes and behaviors about the use of force, abuse of authority, and conflict resolution. She's the co-author of the award-winning book, Equal Opportunity Peacekeeping, Women, Peace, and Security in Post-Conflict Countries. Dr. Samantha Crompvoets, the founder and executive director of Rapid Context, a research consulting firm which focuses on organizational change in the defense sector. She specializes in military sociology, organizational culture, and work policies and practices, especially as they relate to gender. We're also joined by Colonel Gonzalo Mila, retired officer from the infantry in the Uruguayan Armed Forces. From 2013 to 2014, he was the commander of the Uruguayan contingent in MONUSCO in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He currently serves as Peace Operations Advisor in the Uruguayan National Peace Operations Support System in the Ministry of Defense, where he's involved in the development of the 1325 National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security. Next, we're joined by Ina Zavorotko. She's a captain in the Ukrainian Armed Forces. She's currently deployed to MONUSCO as a staff officer and has been working since 2015 on gender issues in the Ukrainian Armed Forces, including the implementation of 1325 and the Ukraine-NATO partnership goal G0013 on gender equality. And finally, Dragita Vuchenich, the National Security Cooperation Officer in the Security Cooperation and Governance Program in the OSCE mission to Montenegro, a position she's held since 2002. She supports police reform in Montenegro in the areas of police professionalization and accountability, focusing, among other topics, on gender and integrity in policing. Jointly with international partners, she's been actively engaged in working to increase the number of women in policing. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and experts for joining us here today. I also want to thank all of the participants who are joining today, our colleagues and co-organizers at OSCE and ODIHR and UN Women, representatives from security sector institutions and peacekeeping operations, peer practitioners, fellow gender equality advocates, and of course, my team members in the Gender and Security Division. It's now my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Ingrid Munsch, the facilitator for today's discussion. And with that, I wish all of us a very fruitful discussion. Thank you so much. Ingrid, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Christina. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you who join us today. It is really a pleasure and a privilege for me to be here. So my name is Ingrid Munsch. I am a project officer in the Gender and Security Division of DCAF, and I have been working on issues related to gender, women's participation, and peacekeeping for about 2 years in the framework of the ELSI initiative. I'm joined and supported today in presenting this webinar to you by my colleagues from the Gender and Security Division, Kim Piaget, Callum Watson, Camille Riesler, Solène Brabant, Marta Gaetani. Thank you so much. My team and I have been studying in a systematic manner the opportunities for and barriers to women's participation in peace operations in different countries and security institutions across the world. What we've increasingly come to realize in the process of doing that is just how significant social factors such as perceptions, beliefs, norms, expectations, attitudes, but also biases and stereotypes are in understanding the barriers to women's meaningful participation. In preparation for this webinar, we developed an imagination-based storytelling exercise, which illustrates exactly this point, in which I want to present to you. So what we did is we told participants a story which was set in a peacekeeping compound, and we asked them to imagine themselves as protagonists of the story, walking around the base and encountering different peacekeepers performing different roles. We ran this exercise with several groups of colleagues and peers, people working in the field of security sector governance and reform. What we found was that predominantly, the participants tended to imagine that a nurse or a gender focal point would be a woman or a person who had stereotypically feminine attributes or characteristics. They also predominantly tended to picture an athletic peacekeeper, an armed guard, or a force commander as a man, or as someone with manly, quote unquote, attributes. And they unanimously imagined that a couple represented on a poster in a peacekeeping setting would by default be a heterosexual couple. What this storytelling experience showed us is just how difficult it is to imagine a different world beyond gender stereotypes and pervasive representations. That is why today's panel will be oriented towards transformative solutions and present a vision of what a different, more gender equal security institutions and peace operations might look like. And just before getting started on this exciting discussion, I do want to note that while today we are talking about women's participation, that is by no means a homogeneous group. There's obviously huge diversity among women based on other identity markers than gender. These identity markers intersect and influence their backgrounds, their needs, their constraints, and the challenges that they face in male-dominated workplaces, which must be accounted for when tailoring solutions. I would encourage us all to keep this in mind throughout the conversation. This being said, I would now like to invite Dr. Sabrina Karim to share with us some elements of the research she has done on this topic, along with her team at the Gender and Security Sector Lab of Cornell University. So Dr. Karim, based on your research, why should we stop fixing the women? You have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First, let me just thank DCAF and the OSCE and all of the panelists for being here today to discuss this very important topic. And thanks to all the participants for making the time to be a part of the conversation and play a part as we hopefully find some kind of a solution or at least a path to making real change. So let me just begin by saying my background is academic, but I've been directly working with security forces for about 10 years everywhere from Peru to Liberia to now with the Gender and Security Sector Lab and DCAF, the MOAT methodology. And in my experience, there's really two kinds of policy fixes that the international community has focused on when we think of gender equality within the security forces and when we think of increasing women's meaningful participation. The first is creating specialized positions that advocate for women's roles. So this is, in a sense, the idea of quote unquote gender mainstreaming, but really it's operationalized in the form of gender focal points or gender units. And as Ingrid mentioned in the scenario that she talked about, we imagine these roles for women and by women. So that's policy fix usually number one. The other one is gender training. Training on whether it's gender mainstreaming or sexual exploitation and abuse, any kind of gender training seems to be the policy prescription for improving on these issues. And what we want to do with this panel, but also with the work that DCAF and the LC initiative and the MOAT methodology is doing, is move beyond these two policy prescriptions. And so the MOAT methodology is actually unique in that it's trying to understand how to increase women's participation or meaningful participation, moving beyond these two policy prescriptions. And two of the issue areas that we look at in depth include organizational culture. So the first is gender stereotypes, issue area number 9 in the MOAT methodology, and issue area 10, which is social exclusion, or really what we think of as kind of masculinity, or thinking about hyper or toxic masculinity that might exist within the security forces. In all the countries that we have conducted the research, both or at least one of these have been one of the major issue areas or one of the main barriers to women's meaningful participation in countries that Cristina mentioned. And they're cross-cutting barriers. So that means that they're issues and barriers that affect any other kind of barrier that might come up, anything from infrastructure to not having enough women in the armed forces or police forces in the first place. So these are two cross-cutting issues that really transcend every aspect of the security forces. Now, in some countries, it was even a taboo to talk about these issues because they might not be culturally appropriate. And this kind of demonstrates the point that if we aren't even able to talk about it, this is a problem, especially for countries that are participating in peacekeeping operations, because it's an international experience. And so if you're not able to talk about gender stereotypes, social exclusion, then it's hard to fully participate in international peacekeeping operations, especially when lives and peace are at stake. And we have other things to think about, such as operational effectiveness. So that's the second point that I want to make, which is that thinking about organizational culture, gender stereotypes, and masculinity is not just important for increasing women's meaningful participation, but also for operational effectiveness. So let me just give an example. One aspect of the gender stereotypes is something called the gendered protection norm, which is a subtle idea that women should not engage in dangerous activities or go to dangerous locations. And we find evidence for this in every country that we have looked at. And it's this idea that women should be protected, even though they're soldiers and even though they're police officers, we still need to protect them from danger. But you can imagine a situation where that kind of mindset actually puts everybody in danger, because actually it might be very helpful to have women in such scenarios, because they're able to maybe collect very important intelligence information that might save lives, for example. And in addition to that example, the research that we have done in these 4 countries, as well as other research that I've done, shows that gender stereotypes, so if you hold rigid views about gender roles, as well as kind of a proclivity for hypermasculine beliefs, then those personnel are actually more likely to escalate in a conflict situation. They're more likely to find misconduct acceptable, and they're least likely to report misconduct. So people that hold these views, rigid gender norms and hypermasculine views, are actually endangering the legitimacy of the peacekeeping mission, and also, and how they represent their country, by finding misconduct acceptable and not reporting it, and actually being more violent. And so the main point here is, I think, that focusing on organizational culture, specifically gender stereotypes and toxic masculinity, helps not only improve women's meaningful participation, but also operational effectiveness more generally. And so it's not just that we're fixing, not fixing women, but we're actually creating meaningful institutional change that's going to improve the security of, security of that country, but also in peacekeeping operations. So I'll just end it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabrina, for highlighting the different points, the example of the gender protection norm, but also for kind of explaining why enhancing women's meaningful participation in peacekeeping operations necessarily involves institutional transformation kind of at the national level. So the rest of today's discussion is going to be shaped around 3 rounds of questions to the panelists. They will have 3 minutes to answer a specific question in each round. And we will keep some time to answer your questions, the audience's questions at the end. So feel free to ask questions throughout the session in the Q&A screen to the panel at large or to a specific panel member. So I would like now to turn to the panel for the first part of our discussion, which is really looking at the problem at hand, which Sabrina started exploring. So I will start this conversation off by asking Dr. Crompvoets first. Dr. Crompvoets, based on your research and your experience working with the defense sector in Australia, is it the women or the institutions that need fixing?
Thanks. So certainly there's a need for systemic and structural change within organizations. So the kind of work I've done over the last 10 years includes a longitudinal study of all of the women who have entered combat arms in the Australian Army. So interviewing them sort of up to 10 times each and understanding their experience. And there's a few things that I've learned from doing that over the last 5 years. And one of them is that I think there's been perhaps too much of a focus on increasing women's participation and not enough about actually looking at how they're empowered in the positions that they hold. So I think that sort of moving from participation to empowerment is really important. And also really, looking at how they're integrated rather than really how they're assimilated, which I think is the model that occurs in most militaries. And that assimilation creates longer term barriers for women's meaningful participation. So that's certainly something that I think is, so there needs to be more focus on. So, and looking at that structural change. So looking at promotion processes, remuneration models. So there's a whole range of things that I think, flexible work policies, all of those more practical things that are enablers or barriers to women's participation are I think really key if there is to become any kind of critical mass, and really for women to have much more longer term careers that are really meaningful and where they can be in positions of authority, not simply positions, special positions for women to hold, but really very authentic positions of authority for those women where they can have decisions over how resources are spent within the organisation, have influence over how promotion processes work, and things like that.
Thank you so much for your comments. And I really appreciate how you're highlighting kind of how retention actually deserves, as much, if not more focus than just recruitment. Mm-hmm. I would like then to turn over to Colonel Mila. So if you think of how things were when you first joined the armed forces in Uruguay, how welcoming was the workplace culture for women? What needed fixing?
Thank you. I will speak in Spanish, so if you want to set the interpretation. Bien, gracias. Bueno, parecería que soy el más antiguo y Sabrina ha expresado muy bien nuestra evolución. Cuando yo comencé la carrera militar en el año 70 como oficial, había muy pocas mujeres y ellas cumplían solamente tareas administrativas. No tenían preparación militar y no tenían tampoco un lugar que las integrara con el resto de las unidades. Y me estoy refiriendo a las mujeres en las unidades de eh, Luego, cuando comenzamos, perdón, cuando comenzamos con la participación en misiones de paz, en el año 93, que empezamos a desplegar contingentes, bueno, ahí sí comenzamos a ver la necesidad de desplegar determinadas especialidades, pero seguíamos igual en tareas muy limitadas, que eran más bien administrativas y sanitarias. En realidad, la percepción que teníamos eh, era esa, de que la mujer no podía cumplir tareas de combate, que debía ser protegida, y eso limitaba su desarrollo en las Fuerzas Armadas. Luego, por el año 2000, cuando hay una apertura importante, donde se autoriza el ingreso de las mujeres en todas las ramas, sin excepción, sobre todo a nivel de los oficiales, se logra su participación, y creo que ahí es donde comienza el gran cambio en Uruguay, que ha sido lento, debo decir, pero que ha sido progresivo en cuanto a que se han adaptado las condiciones, y hoy podemos decir que las mujeres tienen una participación en igualdad de condiciones, aunque todavía hay tarea para hacer, porque no lo hemos logrado a nivel de los soldados. Hay muy pocas mujeres que, a pesar de que pueden hacerlo, quieren ingresar en tareas de combate. Hemos hecho, como fue expresado, se hizo el estudio en Uruguay, el estudio de barreras, y eso nos ha dado luz para trabajar. Creo que tenemos que enfocarnos en la percepción social que todavía existe, de algunos prejuicios hacia la mujer en las Fuerzas Armadas. El cambio dentro de la fuerza se está dando solamente por el cambio generacional. Los oficiales que hoy ya son tenientes coroneles, y algunas de esas mujeres ocupan cargos de comando, sus compañeros hombres las ven como un igual, o sea que no hacen diferencia. Los antiguos somos un poco más paternalistas y nos cuesta más tratarlas como un igual, tendemos a protegerlas, pero bueno, la naturaleza está haciendo su trabajo, y ya casi no tenemos oficiales con esas características, así que creo que esto va a cambiar, y el efecto que tiene sobre las misiones de paz es que, al tener pocas unidades en tareas de combate, eso también limita su participación en los contingentes grandes, como ser unidades de nivel batallón, porque sí salta la participación como en tareas administrativas y sanitarias y logística, pero no en las tareas de combate, que es el 70% del personal que es desplegado en misiones de paz. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Colonel Mila, for describing the Uruguayan example. I think you really illustrated what what Dr. Karim was mentioning regarding the gender stereotypes, the issue of kind of paternalism and the gender protection norm, and the fact that it's really not just about numbers of women overall in the armed forces, but also which roles they're in. And if they're not in combat roles, then we can't really be talking about meaningful participation. So I would now turn to Captain Zavorotko. So I'm sure you've worked in work environments that are supportive and others that are less so. So based on your experience, why should we stop fixing the women? Captain Zavorotko, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks so much. Sorry for that. So we're gonna speak today about the raised issue from so traditionally, these institutions have been recognized as fully male, or male at least migration in them always have been a difficult issue. To my mind, if the goal is women integration, not adaptation or whatever, all efforts should be concentrated on the institutional changes. And only in this way can achieve long-term results. I would like to share with you two experiences, two situations which I have experienced. The first one is a general and the second one is personal. Sure, they both related to Ukrainian context. Just to check, are you hearing good? Me?
You're breaking up a little bit, so I would maybe suggest that you can cut your video so that we can focus on what you're saying.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much.
Let's try this way. So here are two situations which I would like to share to raise the issue and to demonstrate the problem. So the first one, 2013 and 2015. For more than 10 years, Ukrainian armed forces have been deploying two contingents in the Democratic Republic of Congo and in Kosovo. But during a long period of time, there were no single female soldier or officer there. Moreover, in the framework of national personnel, only few females were deployed to peacekeeping missions. For example, in 2014 and 2015, we are talking about 1 woman. Obviously, it was far away from the female percentage required by UN. Importantly to notice that during that period of time, females were already actively serving in the Ukrainian armed forces, but still they were not deployed or even encouraged to participate in peacekeeping missions. So this one is the general situation, and the next one is personal. During more than 3 years, while serving on my first position within the Ukrainian Armed Forces, personally, I faced with obstacles in participating in combat operations. Among them are the joint force operation, which is conducted in the east part of Ukraine, as you might know about the armed conflict, and the peacekeeping missions as well. It was caused not by legal bindings, but by commanders' understanding of the traditional role of male and female in the society. It was very popular for me to hear phrases like, you are too young and you are not married, so maybe I should call your parents to confirm your decision about participating in combat actions. Or the next one, and it is my favorite, you are too young to go there, you even don't have a child, and so on. Now it's a little bit sad, but taking into account my current deployment, you might already guess that many things had changed in the Ukrainian armed forces from that time for better, including the institutional changes, which I would like to talk about in the next address. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your personal experience with us, which really kind of illustrates also what the other panelists have been describing in more theoretical terms. So I would now turn to our last panelist for the last question of this round. This is Vucinic. In your experience working with the Montenegro police, what is it about institutions that need fixing?
Thank you, Ingrid. Well, the mission supports the police reform in Montenegro for almost 2 decades. And we will try to translate the OSCE holistic approach to security into all our activities. So we are focusing on development of the organizational culture and professional and accountable police service that mirrors the society it serves. We all know that the gender equality remains a challenge globally. So I think that more emphasis should be placed on fixing a changeable system rather than fixing men or women who are working within that system. Today in Montenegro, we could still notify gaps and challenges to integrate gender perspective across the institution, but we can also measure some positive developments toward the direction of diversity and gender equality. I can share with you that this year in March, my colleagues from OSCE Secretariat's National Threats Department have produced a report to assess the possibilities for retention and promotion of women in police in Montenegro. Some of the findings from the report shows that Montenegro has been perceived as a patriarchal society where men still predominate the roles of leadership. And such perception reflects the police also. And there's still a view that the police is men's world. So young women and girls could be discouraged either by family or their social circles to join the police. Also, there was noted about the importance of public trust and confidence in the police that we can assess from the public perception surveys that we're doing annually. So therefore, the further that should we do to address, let's say, the institutional, organizational, cultural change is to continue strengthening the police accountability, integrity, security culture in general. We also influenced the development of the human resource management policies that, let's say, encourage women to apply for training and to advance in the career, merit-based system, but also measures to assure retention in the service. We also, what we did and how to influence the institutional and organizational change, we did a lot of activities with the public, because the community perception is also very much important. This is the external factor that influences the institution and the organizational culture in the police. So we are doing a lot to improve the public confidence and trust in the police. In general, the police should be a respectful and representative service. So we are working on increasing police and public understanding of the police jobs, but also gender security needs and so on. I can tell more in the next session.
Thank you so much for the example from Montenegro, and also for highlighting the importance of kind of external factors also on defining the institutional culture of organizations, but also the fact that security institutions in fact can serve as role models in society if they make this effort to transform their culture. That also can increase public trust as a result. So all of our panelists have really called attention to some of the key issues we should be looking to address, really ranging from stereotypes, paternalism, but also retention, flexible working conditions, HR policies, the matter of promotion, also the matter of patriarchal norms in society, the fact that security institutions do not exist in a vacuum. So this variety of systemic issues really points to the need for a holistic range of measures and solutions that tackle institutional, but also sociocultural barriers to women's participation. And this is really why we developed the gender and security toolkits, in response to seeing these persistent problems in the security sector. So now that we have this kind of 360 view of the problems to be tackled, we turn to solutions in the second part of the discussion. So how can we transform problematic structures and systems rather than help women to better fit into them? And what really works? So I'll again turn to Dr. Crompvoets to open this second part. Based on your experience, how do we transform a security sector institution's work culture?
Thank you. I think, look, certainly from my research, looking at culture of the Australian Defence Force and the cultures of other militaries over the last decade or so, I would say that sometimes it's not actually that useful to look at organisational culture as a diagnostic tool, that it can be more informative to look at how power operates within an organisation, to look at the structures that hold those power structures, that maintain that power, to look at who and what has power in the organisation, to look at who has influence rather than just who has authority. So I think sometimes looking at organizational culture can be a bit confusing and confused as a concept, because it diffuses accountability. I think it's hard to point fingers actually when the blame becomes about this very broad concept of organizational culture, and I think it can sort of blur our ability to ask the right questions and really to look at some of those more systemic and structural issues. Because when you look at organizational culture and you're focused on people's attitudes and beliefs and behaviors, you focus on individuals rather than being able to look at the structures and look at how power is distributed within an organization. So you can learn a lot about gender, but also even just looking in male-only groups, as I have done, certainly with the work I've done with special forces, it becomes really clear that looking beyond culture and trying to articulate what the problems are without using the word culture can be really useful.
Thanks a lot for highlighting the importance of accountability. And I would say actually the toolkit deals quite a lot with the matter of leadership and how important the roles of leaders are, like in determining structures, but also on establishing what behaviors get rewarded, what's tolerated, what's not tolerated, so things like this. I'll turn now again to Colonel Mila. So as a man formerly working in the armed forces, what do you think works to change working cultures to better integrate women?
Bueno, aquí voy a aprovechar a hablar tal vez de mi experiencia, algo que me ha tocado vivir y que va a servir para responder también una de las preguntas que está pendiente, que tiene que ver con la mentalidad de protección, si a las mujeres deben ser protegidas porque hay agresión contra ellas. Esto se refiere al año 95. Yo era observador militar, era un capitán en el Sahara Occidental, y dentro de mi equipo, que éramos 20 personas, había una mujer de los Estados Unidos, de jerarquía capitán también. A mí me tocaba la tarea de asignar las actividades diarias, y sin intención yo tendía a darle las tareas más livianas en términos de esfuerzo físico. Por ejemplo, había patrullas que requerían 2 días de pasar la noche en el desierto, y yo evitaba ponerla porque entendía que era una tarea muy dura. Pero un día la capitán vino a hablar conmigo y me pregunta por qué no la mandaba a ese tipo de actividades. Y no tuve respuesta, porque me dio un poco de pena decirle que, porque de hecho, sin intención, pero consideraba que era más débil que nosotros. Entonces, creo que ese es el punto clave. El problema somos los hombres, que pensamos que las mujeres no pueden cumplir ese tipo de tareas. Y a nosotros, como ya lo dije en la pregunta anterior, el cambio se está dando por la convivencia. Cuando podemos trabajar junto con las mujeres, vemos que pueden hacer lo mismo que los hombres, y los límites los ponemos nosotros. De hecho, se les ha puesto menos exigencia física en alguna época, y hoy es igual. Entonces, a medida que esto va ocurriendo, se va dando el cambio naturalmente. Hoy las comandantes que tenemos en las unidades también están haciendo un cambio importante, un esfuerzo importante en ese cambio cultural. Y hay que hacer un esfuerzo también en educación, porque tal vez tratando el tema en forma individual, entre personas, es fácil hacerles entender esta realidad. El tema es la percepción colectiva. Entonces, a veces en forma grupal es muy difícil lograr el cambio de mentalidad. Pero bueno, creo que el tema va por ahí, enfrentar a las personas con la situación para que se den cuenta de que en realidad el problema no son las mujeres, el problema son los hombres, y que nos damos cuenta de que tienen la capacidad de poder hacer todas las actividades. Gracias.
Thank you very much for sharing that experience, and also for shining some light on, well, the issue of changing mindset in institutions and changing how masculinities also play out in institutions. So I'll go again to Captain Zavorotko. Based on your experience of being a pioneer in a male-dominated sector, can you share with us an example of a strategy that you've seen work to have an inclusive working environment?
Thanks a lot. Linking to my previous address, I should notice that within a 4 years period, I have participated in the joint force operation several times. And moreover, currently I'm deployed to UN mission in Democratic Republic of Congo, MONUSCO. So the large portion of such achievements belongs to the institutional changes that were done within the Ukrainian Armed Forces from the gender perspective. I deeply believe these institutional changes illustrate strategies that work to make service environment more inclusive. They were done in the Ukrainian Armed Forces and within the Ukrainian context, but I'm sure they could be useful for others as well. So I'll try briefly address mentioned good tools and practices. Among them are: the first one is removing legal barriers to women appointment in different positions, especially so-called combat positions. This is actually one of the first things that should be done, to my mind. It greatly illustrates the government readiness and willingness to see females on the military service, as well as shows at least formal equal. The next one is increasing number of women in the security and defense sector. This practice is somehow the result of the previous one. It effectively ensures that women are not something unusual for the system. They become part of it, at least in numbers. Moreover, in multi-gender sphere, women don't fear to claim for their rights and to announce their needs in voice. Encouraging women to join the armed forces and show their effectiveness is one of more positive outcome of this practice as well. The next one is establishment system of gender advisors and gender focal points. This practice is one institutional change that will effectively lead to the plenty of others. GenAds and gender focal points is personnel whose main task is to ensure gender equality in every ongoing process and decision-making. This professional GenAds is really a unique tool for making changes with gender lines within the institution. And last but not least is best examples sharing. This practice will encourage females not only to join military institution, but to find the right and the most suitable place for herself. It is the practice of the first female platoon in the military lyceum, first female battalion commander, first female deployed to the contingent, and etc. Best examples sharing should be used to illustrate every military process, from education and training, recruiting companies, to combat experience, including peacekeeping. A brilliant illustration of the effectiveness of institutional changes mentioned above, I assume the Ukrainian peacekeeping reality. For example, currently, Ukraine has deployed first female soldier in the Ukrainian detachment in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Moreover, 20% of national personnel in Democratic Republic are females. And in this year, Ukraine deployed to peacekeeping missions the biggest amount of women that it had ever done before. So for me, it is one of the best examples of institutional changes, how they work, and what are results of them. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for those concrete suggestions and good practices. And I appreciate that you highlighted the importance of the first people to accomplish something. It's something we found also in the MOIP assessments that we've done so far, is that the first women who had joined the security institutions had an incredible power of kind of mobilizing and supporting the newer recruits. I will now turn to Ms. Vucinic for the last question of the round. So in your experience, what are some effective pathways to creating a positive and inclusive workplace culture?
Well, first, I think it is important that police management has proper understanding of diversity, and also that there is strategic orientation for an inclusive workplace. It should remain, they should remain focused on employment, retention, and developing of a representative work service. So the police, like this multi-layer approach, I think that the police should raise awareness and knowledge within the service, but also in the society on importance of presence of women in police, but also fighting gender biases. As example, the mission has started with more targeted actions with the police in 2017 to address issues that influence gender mainstreaming in the police. And then we have jointly with partners from DCAF, but also the Norwegian Center for Integrity in the Defense Sector, we implemented a number of activities with the police to overcome some of the spotted challenges. So we did a lot to integrate gender perspectives into all strategic documents. Then we developed curriculum for gender training and training of training courses. Then we advocated with the police academy to incorporate gender, human rights, fundamental freedoms agenda into their regular and mandatory curriculums for cadets. Then we did some activities to increase public awareness on inclusive working environment and promoting democratic policing. So maybe a good indicator is that in 2017, there was around 10% of women police officers in Montenegro. And up to date, we have some 13.9, I think, sworn women police officers. So the situation is improving, but step by step, it is going slowly. The situation is not very good. The women are significantly unrepresented in the Montenegrin police, and there are no women in the leadership positions. So these are issues that we still have to address. And I would like to mention maybe the latest activity that we just recently closed. That was the public raising awareness campaign entitled "We Are the Power of Team for More Women in Policing." So together with the police, women police officers, we recorded 6 promotional movies because we wanted to increase public awareness about police jobs. We wanted to attract young people to join the police academy, but we also wanted to present what is policing, what is police job. So they know when they apply for working in the police, what is that job about. That is very demanding, specific job that needs you. And this is something that has to be communicated very clearly. That's why we also produced a brochure and poster with a lot of useful information for all young people who are interested with working in the police, because I think the communication is key to the success. So basically, I think that in your toolkit, in the policing and gender toolkit, this is written by the book. So we did a lot of activities that you presented there as good recommendations and step way ahead. And we can share a lot of good practices in this area.
Thank you so much for these different examples and the really wide and varied types of measures that all of you have proposed. So I will now turn to the third part of this discussion, and that is to what exactly it is that these measures aim to achieve. So what we're talking about today is a vision of success which goes beyond numbers or proportions of female staff. But we're talking about really integrating a gender perspective in the security sector and actively advancing gender equality. So what would success look like? I'm going to ask Dr. Crompvoets first. So in your mind, what does an inclusive, positive institutional culture, or the right words that you would use to describe this, what would that look like in a security institution?
I think it's when we, when we have to stop talking about women specifically, and having days to mark women's achievements, and when it is far more, I think, institutionalized in the organization. That's when I think that we know that there is success, when when so much effort and attention, when we don't have to have webinars like this, as fantastic as it is. But yeah, I think I mean, so many conferences I've been to, certainly over the last decade, where you hear the same, the same things over and over again about how to increase women's participation, about sexual harassment and sexual abuse of women, around barriers to recruitment and to reaching positions of authority and influence. And I think, as I said at the beginning, really it is that, and the sort of one of the themes of this discussion has been about that need for systemic change. So I think it's when those power structures have truly been challenged and changed, and when we don't need to be championing it so hard, I think that's when there is some success.
Thank you very much for this. I will turn now to Colonel Mila to add to your vision of what success looks like. So Colonel Mila, from your perspective as a practitioner, what does success in institutional work culture that is inclusive look like?
Bueno, está un poco alineado con lo que dice Samantha. Creo que el éxito lo lograríamos cuando no haya que pensar que hay mujeres y hombres, cuando podamos pensar como un equipo y que todos forman parte y que no estemos pensando si uno hace una cosa o la otra, que sea naturalmente aceptado. Y creo que de alguna manera nosotros en Uruguay hemos avanzado mucho en ese sentido, sobre todo nuestros despliegues en el terreno, donde si bien el número de mujeres es poco, pero rondan un 6%, ya hoy en día cuando vamos a desplegar una base a algún lugar, zona un poco crítica o con malas condiciones, no estamos pensando si van mujeres u hombres, ya la desplegamos y sabemos que está todo previsto tanto para mujeres como hombres, y son una más del equipo, o sea que no hay una discriminación específica por el tema. Pero creo que todavía faltan cosas por hacer, sobre todo en Uruguay. Creo que hay que ir a la parte profunda del problema. Deberíamos encarar una campaña de comunicación importante a nivel de la población para promover el rol de las mujeres en las Fuerzas Armadas y que no existan esos prejuicios que todavía perduran. Y a nivel de los hombres creo que está incorporado. No obstante, hay que seguir actuando en lo que es la parte de educación, en toda la cadena de mando, y mantenerlo en las currículas de estudio para que, seguir fortaleciendo esos avances que tenemos y que nos permitan llegar a ese ideal. Que, no haya que pensar si la mujer puede estar en la fuerza, si es más débil, si no puede hacer tales cosas. Creo que eso se está logrando y de a poco iremos venciendo esas barreras que todavía nos quedan. Pero creo que hay que ir más a los hechos y no tanto a hablar del problema, ya enfrentarlo y actuar. Y las directivas nacionales que apuntan en esa dirección tienen que ser acompañadas con eso, con hechos, para poder acelerar el proceso. Gracias.
Thank you for your response, and you've highlighted the role of education, educating men also within those institutions, but also the role of communication campaigns. And on that point, I do want to mention an interesting example, both from the toolkit and from the first MOIP report we published on the Ghana Armed Forces, which is the importance of challenging kind of perception barriers, not just to women working in traditionally male roles, but also the barriers for men to work in traditionally so-called female roles. So for instance, something that was observed in the context of Ghana was that cross-training meant that more women would work as drivers or operations assistants or guards, but also that more men would work as cooks and waiters, so that it went in both directions. Now, this example aside, I would ask Captain Zavorotko, if you can describe the best, most inclusive work environments and teams you've been in.
Thanks. All institutional changes mentioned in the previous block help to form inclusive service environment. And I'm really lucky to have been serving in it at least during last 3 years. This experience includes national military forces and international environment as well. Compare these two inclusive service environments, I can certainly say they look very similar. And actually the benefits are the same. All women needs are counted. Male and female are treated in the same way and performed the same duties. They have the same payment and the same responsibility. Both of them are equal soldiers whose main task is to be professional. Obviously, such inclusive environment will benefit not only for females inside the military system, but for the organization as well. Pool of candidates for recruitment and promotion is wider. It means higher competitiveness that for sure led for more professional army. Having best personnel in the institution obviously will increase its effectiveness and readiness to perform combat and non-combat tasks. Moreover, having women in the ground, for example, in female engagement teams or CIMIC, often led to better understanding with local population, especially with female and kids. And such better connection has influence on the information gathering and recce during the task performing. Moreover, males serving shoulder by shoulder with females automatically learn to respect them through the combat experience as well. Male stereotypes in women capacities and talents, if such are existed, are going to be ruined. Thus, such men serving in the inclusive environment will create the same environment in their homes and their families. Practically, it means the decreasing of domestic violence, including the physical one. Thus, as we can see, inclusive service environment will be benefit not only for females, but for the institution, military or peacekeeping, and for the whole society as well. And this is really a unique way. We ensure rights and opportunities for one group, but in the result, everyone receives benefits. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for your response, and yeah, for highlighting that it's not just about kind of doing the right thing, doing what's right on the human rights level, but also that the benefits that this brings to societies as a whole. So Ms. Vucinic, I will turn to you for the last question of the panel. You have worked closely, as you explained, with the Montenegro police, and the work you've done includes shifting the institutional environments to make it more inclusive. So to you, what does success look like in this matter?
That's a very nice question. I can say that there is progress in Montenegro, and I'm very happy about that. In our latest Raising Awareness campaign, we could see huge interest from the field, from young girls for working in the police, but we also measured a good response from men colleagues from the who work in the police, who were very supportive to the campaign and to their colleagues during the campaign. So for me, ideal situation, talking about the context in Montenegro, would be that one day we are not talking about numbers, figures, that we live this thing naturally, just as integrated and integral part of all other activities that we are already trying to do. And I would like to see women on the leadership and decision-making positions. And maybe at the moment, I would like to see more female role models that would, let's say, motivate others for development and advancement in the career.
Thank you for those impactful last words. It's really great to have such a diverse panel today. Such a variety of experiences and professional trajectories, and for the inspiring vision of success that you have drawn up. So I now would like to open the floor to questions from the audience. We're going to have about 20 minutes for the Q&A. And so I will ask panelists to keep your answers brief so that we have time to tackle several questions and to hear from all of you. And I also want to acknowledge the discussions that are taking place in the Q&A and the contributions from people. Please be assured that we're taking notes of what you're sharing with us, and we'll read the comments with interest and follow up. So I'm going to start with the first question. Sorry, I'm just checking the Q&A. So the first question is addressed to Colonel Mila. So you mentioned paternalism, and the feeling of protection is still existing in the old generation in the Uruguayan Armed Forces. And so the question is, how does this relate to the question of violence against women in the armed forces?
Bueno, sí, creo que traté de responderlo en mi segunda intervención. No es que existe una violencia contra la mujer en las fuerzas, sí hay una, sobre todo en los antiguos, hay una percepción, y creo que viene de ese rol asignado durante mucho tiempo de que el hombre es el protector y el proveedor. Entonces nos cuesta ver a la mujer como en igualdad de condiciones y no como un ser que tenemos que proteger. Entonces naturalmente hay una intención de no darle tareas difíciles. Yo me he tenido que esforzar para no hacer discriminación con los hombres, y cuando asigno tareas, no mirar si es hombre o mujer, porque como lo dije en un momento, tendía a una observadora protegerla porque entendía que era mujer y que no podía cumplir. Y luego me di cuenta de que no, eso no es necesario. Y lo veo, y aprendí a ver a los jóvenes, que ellos, y sobre todo en la misión, no discriminan. Cuando dan una orden, no están mirando el sexo, están dando la orden y están mirando al integrante del equipo, y todos cumplen por igual. Por lo tanto, es ese sentimiento paternalista que lo tenemos incorporado y que no es tan fácil dejarlo de lado, pero no tiene que ver con que los hombres sean agresivos con las mujeres dentro de la fuerza, tiene que ver con ese sentimiento de protección. Gracias.
Thank you for this answer. I have another question, which I'm going to ask several of you, which is, so who is best placed in the security institution to encourage the change that is needed? How can we raise questions of military masculinity and patriarchy with the senior military leadership? So maybe I would start with Dr. Crompvoets on this one.
So in my experience, it can be useful to talk about that without talking about military masculinity and gender, even, like to sort of find other ways to communicate those issues and really those sort of principles of equality, but you know, without it sounding like sort of academic speak or political correctness. Certainly in the work I do, you know, having been an academic for a long time and then working in a much more applied sense, I've really had to change my language a lot in how I communicate to senior leaders. And I think that's been the key to success in actually being heard in a lot of those senior leader forums, by not hiding and you know, sort of pulling away from talking about gender or masculinity, but finding a different language to describe it that is a bit more relatable and perhaps not as threatening to some people.
Thank you for that answer and raising the question of language. I want to ask the same question to Captain Zavorotko. For you, who is best placed to encourage the change that is needed, and how to talk about these topics of, you know, patriarchy essentially with the senior leadership?
I should say that it's really a good question, especially if we're talking about a new issue or a new topic that is gonna to be implemented in already existing society, especially if we are talking about military is much more higher than in any other civilian society. So in this case, I would say that the best way is to be enough professional to prove that this issue is really pretty important and that it must be implemented. To make this, the person must be really professional and really aware about all processes that are already going inside the institution. So from the one hand, he or she must be really a military professional. And from the other hand, he or she must have a good gender lines, yeah, in the processes which must be fulfilled, and to show special gaps and certain situations for the military authorities, for commanders. So as soon as the commander will got that in the existing systems there are with the help of gender perspective, I think it is the point where he or she will say, yes, I'm gonna do that.
Thank you for this. I would like to hear the perspective from the police side, actually, with you, Dragita Vuchenich. How would you answer that question? Who is best placed in the kind of police institution to encourage change, and what is the role of the leadership in that process?
That's actually the leadership, because they have to be the role model and they have to show the knowledge and interest and the strategic orientation for something like that. But we should also work from the bottom up to raise the awareness and just to get people know what are these terms that we are talking about, because sometimes the language can be misinterpreted because terminology could be different. Sometimes if you're coming from different culture, from different context, we perceive things differently. So communication, clear communication is very important. In my experience, in my practical life with the police, I work a lot with the senior management, but also with people in human resources. They are extremely important. They have to understand the needs. And what I like very much is communication office. We call it spokesperson office, but there is a team of dedicated people who are, let's say, selling the message within and outside the police. So these are, let's say, 3 addresses that I'm working a lot in this area.
Thank you for that. We now have a question which is for Dr. Karim. So this is a question. So the question is, to what extent have you analyzed policy and procedures for the host organization from where we expect to draw peacekeepers? And then the person says, my experience in the UK is that their pension contributions are affected when undertaking such roles. This adversely affects women who have greater reliance on a pension post-retirement at a determined stage of their lives.
Yes, thank you for an excellent question. So the MOAT methodology is precisely about measuring barriers to women's meaningful participation from the contributing country, the police and military contributing country. And so this particular barrier, which has to do with, in the UK, as I'm well aware, the panelist, or not the participant knows, they have to give up their jobs in order to participate in peacekeeping operations. And that means that then they lose their pension for those years. And sometimes they even have to pay into their pension in order to continue, serving and receiving the pension in the future. And so this basically means that the participation in peacekeeping operations is not something that's valued in the UK. They don't make it easy for people to participate in the country And so this would fit in our framework under issue area 7, which is career values. How important is it, or how prestigious is it for you to participate in peacekeeping operations for your job, to be able to move up? And obviously in the UK, the way that they've structured things, and also in the US is also very similar. It's extremely difficult to participate in peacekeeping operations. And so there's many barriers because it's not something that's valued within the country.
Thank you very much for that clarification. And yeah, it's true that we found through MOIP assessments in a specific country that peacekeeping can actually prevent police and armed forces from working in second jobs, which they might do if they were in the country. And so in that sense, there can be financial costs rather than benefits to deploying, and especially for kind of lower paid personnel. There's a question addressed to Captain Zavorotko. So the person is asking if you could explain how you overcame the stereotypes you faced when you were joining the Ukrainian military. If you'd like to address that.
Thanks for that question. I would say the only way is to show that you are a real professional in what you are doing or in what you're going to do. For me, it is the most easiest and the most hardest in the same moment way to gain respect and to show that you equal soldier or an equal officer as an equal professional. So I had a stereotypes because of my gender. But my receipt and my way is to show that you are a professional. As soon as people will understand this, that you gave good advices, because I'm a legal advisor, so people need to come to legal advisor to solve different issues which are going on day-to-day basis. As soon as people understand that you are a professional in what are you doing, they start to respect you. And if they start to respect you, they will not have even right or even thought about stereotyping you with any other issues that might have been in their head before that. I hope it will help.
Thank you for sharing this. I do have an additional question, an interesting one. So the question which I'm going to ask to all four of you is whether you have any thoughts about screening male applications and recruits to make sure institutions do not accept people with a prior hostile attitude towards women. And then the follow-up is, are there institutions that do this already, or are we focusing on selecting the right women and not the right men? So I will ask Dr. Crompvoets to start on this one, if you want.
So I think, I think to screen, men initially at recruitment is sort of ignores that process of institutionalization that happens after they join. So even, they might have quite positive attitudes to women, but what happens when they're in a, in that military, masculine military mindset? Certainly research that we've done where even individuals might report attitudes and beliefs about women as individuals can change quite dramatically when they're in a group setting, and certainly when there's alcohol involved. So there can be a change. I think what can be really useful is measures of psychosocial safety climate. So measuring how conducive an environment or a unit is to sort of those hostile attitudes becoming hostile behaviours, and really, I think, sort of measuring it before it actually takes place. So sort of getting a pulse check of the climate of a unit or an organisation to understand, how likely it might be that misconduct could occur if it's not kept in check, and if there's not a strong leader there who can call out those kind of behaviours.
Thank you. Really important points about kind of the process of socialization into a unit and not just attitudes when entering. And we do, DCAF, have quite a lot of assessment tools. We agreed, that this is quite a useful tool to know what you're dealing with, and tools like the gender self-assessments, but also organizational climate assessments, which you know very well. I will ask the same question to you, Dragita Vuchenich. So do you have any thoughts about screening applicants to make sure institutions don't accept people with a hostile attitude?
Well, if I understood this question correctly, if we are talking about security sector institutions, there must be kind of vetting process for certain positions. But as a part of regular proceedings, I'm not sure. I don't know how this can be seen on the paper and during the interview, because we should not focus here only about hostile attitude towards women, because we should think here about discrimination on race, women, ethnicity, culture, whatsoever. And any kind of discrimination is not desirable in any organization. If I reply to your question.
No, yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for highlighting kind of the other types of attitudes that are not acceptable alongside. We've talked about gender a lot today, but obviously there are intersections of other attitudes that come into play. In order to keep to time, but to also give a chance to our last two panelists to express themselves, I'd like to invite kind of final words or takeaway message. So in 30 seconds, Colonel Mila, I would invite you if you have a takeaway message or final words to share, so please do so.
Gracias. Bueno, creo que este es un tema muy importante y que se debe confrontar directamente, porque cuando uno hace la pregunta directa a las personas, creo que se dan cuenta de que el problema a veces son ellos y no las personas, pero sí hay que seguir avanzando. No podemos tener una sociedad que discrimine, hay que educar y queda mucho por hacer, pero el cambio es posible y todos tenemos las mismas oportunidades. Así que el mensaje es abrir las puertas y que hombres y mujeres puedan trabajar en igualdad de condiciones sin ningún tipo de discriminación. Para eso tenemos que trabajar en los diferentes sectores de la sociedad, políticas claras y comunicaciones adecuadas para que ese mensaje llegue a todos. Gracias.
Thank you for those last words, inspiring last words. Captain Zavorotko, I will give you the floor. If you have any last words in 30 seconds, final comments that you would like to share.
Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot for this amazing event, for gathering all us together and for giving a unique opportunity to share our experiences. It was a real pleasure to participate in the event. So the main thing that I would like to say is that fixing the women is really not a time to fixing the women. It is a time to fixing the organizations. And many words were said about this during these events. So, and I think the main thing is just to start doing this on your own level whenever you can. And only in this way, we can achieve those results which we would like personally in the institution and in the society in general.
Thank you for that call to action. Dr. Crompvoets, I'll give you 30 seconds for final message.
Sure. So thank you very much again for the invitation to participate. I think we often focus so much on the challenges around gender and women's participation, but I think there's also lots of really positive stories from the work many of us have done over many years. And I think, given COVID and it's hard to travel and do conferences and everything else. I think it's really important to share case studies of success and where there has been change, and it doesn't have to be big transformative organizational change, but even really small impactful changes, and sharing how those successes have been achieved, I think is really important, going forward for all of us, so that we can, certainly be energized by the work that's out there and what's effective, but also learn from what other countries are doing and other militaries, and yeah, not always focus on just what's really hard and continues to be hard.
Thank you for this. I really appreciate the positive notes that we're ending on. Dragita Vuchenich, I would invite you if you want to share any final words for today.
I would mention again that we should have this holistic and comprehensive approach to security. We should base work on our professional and personal integrity and accountability. We should work in and respect the diverse environment. And I think that there is the power in the team. So we should work together in the team as one, and there will be the result at the end.
Thank you very much. So I see we're getting to the end of this panel, and that's a shame because I would love to continue hearing from all of you. Before closing, I would like to invite one last time Dr. Karim, if you have any final words or comments in about 1 minute, which I know must be hard. Dr. Karim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ingrid. And thanks to the panelists for such a rich discussion and bringing in all your expertise and personal experiences. I think we've learned a lot. I know I learned a lot just listening from all of you, so thank you. I think, a few things stand out from listening to the conversation. I think the first thing is that there's no one policy prescription that's going to change everything magically. And I think it's a combination of everything that everyone has talked about today, both in terms of structural changes, individual level changes, cultural changes, all of those things together is what is going to create change. And so, I think this idea that there's some magic bullet solution to these problems is we need to move beyond that and start focusing more on the process and not necessarily on the outcome. So processes like having these kinds of discussions, for example, and the processes that make up some of the decision making of what people have talked about. I just wanted to say particularly struck by the story that Colonel Mila said about in 1995 about how he had this moment of self-reflection and realization that I did something wrong. I had this prejudice that I didn't even necessarily know was wrong. And that's really kind of what we're dealing with at a larger scale, I think. And so that kind of self-reflection is really important, but the only way that you get there is with the process, with dialogue, discussion, and also, every one of us working hard on these issues and pointing out, moving the agenda forward. And so I think all of the work that everybody is doing is very important, and only together can we really make a change. It's not just one person's job or one policy, or one country, but it's everyone working together. So thank you, everyone, for all the important work that you are doing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karim, and thank you to all of our panelists today. It was really such a great opportunity to share ideas, and I really hope we can continue to engage in the future with the audience, with the panelists, everyone. So we have reached the end of this webinar. So I know that Natasha is going to share a short survey in the chat for you all to evaluate the webinar and to share ideas for future webinars. That would be really helpful if you take the time to complete it. So thank you very much in advance for that. We're also going to share in a follow-up email the link to today's recording, as well as some additional resources. And we're really happy to share additional information about anything that was discussed today. I will also mention that the next webinar organized by DCAF, UN Women, and OSCE ODIHR is going to be on 15th of June at the same time as today's webinar. I won't try to say what time that is because I know we have many time zones here. And it's going to be titled A Security Sector Governance Approach to Women, Peace and Security, holding the security sector to account on gender equality. So do stay tuned for more information about the events in the next few weeks. And once again, thank you to all the participants, to all the panelists, to the Gender and Security Division, to Natasha from UN Women for managing all the tech today, and of course to the interpreters who did an excellent job as well today. So thank you very much, and hopefully see you soon again.